We're here. Calling the meeting to order. This is meeting number 70 of the Standing Committee on International Trade. Today's meeting is taking place in a hybrid format pursuant to the House Order of June 23, 2022, and therefore members are attending in person in the room and remotely using the Zoom application. I need to make a few comments for the benefit of the witnesses and members. Please wait until I recognize you by name before speaking. When speaking, please speak slowly and clearly. For those participating by video conference, click on the microphone icon to activate your mic, and please mute yourself when you are not speaking. With regard to interpretation, for those on Zoom, you have the choice at the bottom of your screen of either floor, English or French. For those in the room, you can use the earpiece and select the desired channel. A reminder that all comments should be addressed through the chair. For members in the room, if you wish to speak, please raise your hand. For members on Zoom, please use the raised hand function. The clerk and I will manage the speaking order as best we can, and we appreciate your patience and understanding in this regard. Please also note that during the meeting, it is not permitted to take pictures in the room or screenshots on Zoom. Should any technical challenges arise, please let us know, and we will suspend in order to ensure everyone has translation. Pursuant to Standing Order 1082 and the motion adopted by the committee on Monday, May 29th, 2023, the committee is resuming a study of the impacts of the underused housing tax on Canadian border communities. And we have with us today from the Department of Finance, Amanda Riddle, Director, Real Property and Financial Institutions, Sales Tax Division, Tax Policy Branch, and Robert Ives, Expert Advisor, Sales Tax Division, Tax Policy Branch. And from the Department of Foreign Affairs, Trade and Development, Mark Allen, Executive Director, United States. Welcome all. We will start with opening remarks, of course, and then start with rounds of questions. Ms. Riddle or Mr. Eves, would you like to start, please?
I would. Thank you, Chair. Thank you for having us. Good afternoon. My name is Amanda Riddle. I'm the Director of the Real Property and Financial Institutions section of the Sales Tax and Excise Division of the Tax Policy Branch at Finance Canada. I'm here today to provide the committee with a brief overview of the Federal Underused Housing Tax, or UHT, which my section was tasked with developing by the government. I'm joined by my Finance Canada colleague, Robert Ives, as well as my colleague from Global Affairs Canada, who can speak to any implications that the tax might have on Canada-US relations. So the UHT is an annual 1% tax that applies on the value of generally non-resident, non-Canadian owned residential property in Canada that is regarded as vacant or underused. The measure originated from a 2019 election platform commitment of the government. In Budget 2021, the government announced its intention to implement the UHT effective the beginning in the 2022 calendar year. Budget 2021 indicated that the tax is intended to do two things. Firstly, to help ensure that foreign non-resident owners of underused Canadian housing pay their fair share of Canadian tax, with the revenues helping to support the government's investments to make housing more affordable for Canadians. And secondly, to help ensure that housing in Canada is available for the use of Canadians. Budget 2021 also announced that the government would be releasing a consultation paper to provide stakeholders with an opportunity to comment on the parameters of the proposed tax. Later that year, a detailed backgrounder on the proposed parameters for the UHT was released. It was on August 6th for a 6-week consultation period. The consultation also requested views on whether special rules should be established in respect of residential properties located in smaller resort and tourism communities, and if so, what those rules should be. 41 submissions were received during the 6-week consultation period. 25 of those submissions were made by individuals, and 16 submissions were made by organizations. The legislation to enact the tax was tabled in December 2021 and received royal assent in June 2022. So the UHT applies on an annual calendar year basis to the person that is the legal owner of a, quote, residential property as defined for the Act on December 31st of the calendar year. Certain owners are excluded from the scope of the UHT, including Canadian citizens and permanent residents of Canada that own their residential property directly in their own right. All other owners are required to file an annual UHT return in respect of each residential property they own. In this return, an owner may be eligible, however, to claim an exemption from the tax, for example, based on the use of the property, such as where it is being rented out on a long-term basis, or the type of owner, for example, if the owner is a corporation that is 90% or more Canadian-owned. The inaugural UHT returns for the 2022 calendar year were due on April 30th, 2023. However, the tax had received very little attention until earlier this year when the CRA had released the UHT form and UHT technical guidance. Once those materials were published, it became apparent that there was a general lack of awareness regarding the tax and some confusion about what types of properties were subject to the filing requirement. So on March 27th, the CRA extended the UHT filing deadline for 6 months they didn't extend the filing deadline. They decided to waive penalties and interest, which is effectively like extending the filing deadline for 6 months until October 31st, 2023. As a federal tax, the UHT is intended to apply broadly and consistently across Canada. The one exception to this is for vacation homes in certain areas of the country. To qualify for the vacation property exemption, a residential property must meet both a location and a use requirement. So the property must be in an area that is an area of Canada that is generally considered rural. More technically, the rules are the property must be located in an area outside of a census metropolitan area or a census agglomeration having 30,000 or more residents. Or it could be included in the rural parts of a CMA or a census agglomeration having 30,000 or more residents. The property must also be used by its owner or the owner's spouse or common law partner for at least 28 days in the calendar year. These days do not need to be consecutive. When administrative data from the 2022 tax filings becomes available, the department will have a much better sense of foreign ownership rates and property use by foreign owners, which will be of great benefit for future policy analysis. So we look forward to your questions. Thank you.
Thank you very much. That was very informative. On to Mr. Baldinelli for 6 minutes, please.
Thank you, Madam Chair, and I'd like to thank the officials for being with us this afternoon and for your brief outline and the consultation that you did provide to us just prior to our travel to Washington, where we met with several members of Congress and representatives there. As you probably know, I come from an area that straddles the Niagara River and borders on Lake Erie, and I have a lot of American summer properties that are owned in that area. In fact, I mean, you could go back. You'll have an opportunity. Hopefully, you'll stay and listen to some of the residents that are appearing later on this afternoon. Some of the properties have been owned since 1905. In fact, in Crystal Beach, there's a facility called the Buffalo Canoe Club. The Buffalo Canoe Club was established in 1881. And moved to Fort Erie in 1891. And the facility still exists and operates with not only American residents, but Canadian residents as well. I mean, we've had American visitors for over a century, people who've owned properties for over a century. Those American residents are part of our social fabric. To those that live in our community, it's not considered an international border. It's a river that separates two friends. So when we see these concerns, I was first contacted by a gentleman that will be making one of the presentations later on today. He wrote to me in February of 2022. I wrote to the minister in March of 2022 seeking clarification and some guidance with regards to the changes and how this would operate with seasonal property owners. And we're still looking for that kind of clarification because there's anomalies. Some people will be exempt, and you'll find out later on this afternoon, one resident has a home that is taxed, and 450 meters away, they're exempt. And so the situation doesn't make sense. I think there's a solution to the problem that exists, and that we can find a common ground with regards to the regulations and how we can word those regulations so that we can find a common ground that will solve this issue. And going back, you had talked about consultation and the consultation document, 41 submissions. Were any of those from people in our community?
I'm going to pass this to Rob Ives because he actually is very familiar with the consultations and all the submissions received.
So, of the 41 submissions, there wasn't a single one from the Niagara region.
Now, how did the government go about seeking input? I mean, again, we're talking about American residents. They're there for the summer, but during the winter months, they're in Buffalo. So how would they even have known that this tax was being considered?
So the tax was announced in Budget 21 in the budget documents. There was a mention in the budget documents that a consultation would be taking place very shortly thereafter. The consultation paper was released on August 6th of 2021. The Department of Finance uses social media to get the word out: Twitter, Facebook, LinkedIn, those sorts of sites. And the consultation was open for a 6-week period. But to your question, there was nothing from the Niagara region, unfortunately.
So there was a lack of general awareness, and I think, and you had mentioned, Ms. Rydell, that there was almost until this year, until it was announced. I mean, I've been working with the representative from the United States, Congressman Higgins, to bring forward this issue for over a year now, and there seems to be still some concerns. And Mr. Allen, you will know that, I mean, this was raised with the Canadian government on May 5th with the United States Trade Representative. In fact, on May 25th, Representative Higgins and 13 individuals wrote to Secretary Blinken with regards to it. I mean, it's becoming a trade impediment to us, potentially, with regards to the relationship. And I don't think we want to do that. I mean, again, the relationships that we have, like I said, are so close. We consider our area a binational region, not differences between the two countries. So are there ways, I mean, is the government, based on, consultation and input from the Americans, are they looking at making changes to address some of the concerns that those people have?
So the UHT is a brand new tax, and we were hoping to have a consultation period and feedback. We received a fairly limited amount of feedback at the time. Once, as I was saying, the UHT form came out and the guidance came out, it suddenly hit people's radar, and we received quite a bit of feedback since that time, and I can confirm the department is carefully considering all of that feedback.
Chair, how much time?
Seconds.
I almost forgot what my one question was going to be. With regards to that, you know what? Yeah, if you've got a question, I'll ask my
I've heard a lot of concerns from people that are trying to go through this, that they've had to have their accountants do the tax filing, and it's cost about $800, which is more than most people spend doing their entire tax. Why is it so complicated, and how could we fix that?
So the form is, I don't know how many of you are aware, but there's similar types of taxes that are imposed at the municipal level, and they're relatively straightforward. You have your roll number, you can just click a button, and you can do it in a matter of seconds. That's largely thanks to the fact that municipalities have access to property ownership data, and they can reach out directly to property owners. The federal government doesn't have that same luxury. So in the form that we have, it's a bit more complex in the sense that we're trying to gather a bit more data. But the form is not that complex. It asks for some basic tombstone data, some bit of data about the property, and then you check a box if you're entitled to an exemption. We have heard that accountant fees are high, around between $500 and $1,000. I can't speculate on whether that will change, but that does seem high to me.
I'm sorry, you're way over. I was anxious to hear the answer as well as the rest of the committee. Mr. Varani for 6 minutes, please.
Thank you. Thank you very much for being here. I'm going to go a little fast because there's a lot of ground to cover, but just so I'm clear, just tell me if I'm yes or no if I have this correct. So, Ms. Rydell, this tax applies to non-Canadian citizens, non-Canadian permanent residents. Is that correct?
It applies to properties that are owned. Actually, you know what, Rob, you can probably give a more comprehensive answer. Yep.
Yeah, it applies to non-resident non-Canadians as well as a number of entities, Canadian corporations that are owned by foreign persons, and foreign corporations.
Okay. But in the norm, it doesn't apply to Canadian residents and Canadian
Correct.
citizens, correct? Okay. And it was addressed, you mentioned two the objectives at the outset, Ms. Riddell. They were outlined in the budget or in the platform, and they talked about addressing the shortage of housing and that Canadian housing should be ideally targeted at Canadians. That's one of the objectives of the tax?
Yeah, so the two main objectives to the tax, I'll read them again. It's to help ensure that foreign non-resident owners of underused Canadian housing pay their fair share of Canadian tax, with the revenues going to help support the government's investments to make housing more affordable, but also to help ensure that housing is made available for use of Canadians.
And you talked about some of the exemptions, but there's many exemptions, right? So what I understand is that it doesn't apply to a property that is not livable year-round. So a place in sort of ski country that's not winterized, or a cottage that's not winterized is not applicable to the UHT. That's correct?
Right. There was a lot of consideration given to making sure that the tax didn't apply in situations where it was unfair. So there are a series of exemptions. I can go through them all, but generally speaking, the categories are there's exemptions based on the occupant of the residential property, if it's your primary place of residence, for example. There are exemptions based on the location and use, such as the vacation exemption, which we were talking about. There are exemptions based on the property conditions. So if it's a new construction or it's not suitable to live in year-round or it's uninhabitable because of a disaster or renovations, for example. And then, of course, there's exemptions based on the type of owner. So even though you have to file, you're entitled to an exemption if you're a Canadian corporation that is 90% or more Canadian-owned, et cetera.
For the committee, if you actually tabled the full list of all of the exemptions? So if you can actually provide that to us in writing, the full list
Sure,
of all of the
happy to,
exemptions?
yes.
But I also understand you mentioned if you or your spouse stay there for 28 days or more, but I also understand there's an exemption if your child is at a Canadian learning institution and is living there, it's also not subject to the tax. Is that correct?
I can handle that, yeah. So if a child of the owner or the owner's spouse is there for 180 days in a calendar year and is studying at a designated learning institution, then the property would be exempt.
For the people that are filing for this tax, are these the individual's principal residences or are they vacation homes? I presume it's the latter because their normal home is somewhere else and they're using this temporarily. Is that a fair assumption?
Typically, it would be a secondary residence of those individuals, yeah.
Any sense of sort of the general income status or level of wealth of these individuals who have secondary homes in a foreign jurisdiction such as Canada?
That data, I don't think we have, but, one can assume that if someone owns a secondary property, they're probably more well off.
That's certainly the assumption that I would draw. And can you tell me, because this has come up just most recently in terms of the last set of questions you were being asked, so this is more directed to Mr. Allen, but we've actually seen that the U.S.-Canada trading relationship has never been at as high a level as it is right now. Do you have any evidence that shows that the UHT is having an impact on the trading relationship between our two countries? I'm talking about Canada and the United States?
No.
No. Do you have any reason to think it may have an impact on the trading relationship?
No.
Okay. Can you tell me in terms of some of the consultations that took place, what efforts did you make to sort of get the word out about the consultations? Like you described that it was in the sort of the budget, it was telegraphed, but just elaborate a bit more on the consultations that took place.
Yeah, well, the consultation was launched on August 6th, as was previously mentioned. Social media was used to amplify the fact that a consultation was ongoing. There were certain limitations, I guess, as a result of the election that was called on August 16th, 2021. There was 36 days during the consultation period that the department was subject to the caretaker convention.
Let me put it to you this way: the exemptions that were carved out based on use, occupancy, how old the building is, the seasonal components you mentioned, Ms. Riddell. Did those exemptions, were they elaborated upon and specified as a result of the consultations? Did the consultations feed into how those exemptions were created?
The consultation detailed the vast majority of the exemptions that exist currently.
Okay, so that's useful to know. I have nothing further. I'm okay.
Very much. Mr. Savard Tremblay for 6 minutes, please.
Merci. Alors, monsieur. Mr. Allen, so you are at Executive Director, Department of Foreign Affairs, Trade and Development for the United States. We received Representative Higgins here via teleconference. We received him last Monday. And at some point, I asked him a question. What is the extent of these contestations or challenges in the United States? To what extent can we say that people are angry with this tax? He was saying that many of his colleagues were not involved. Besides the letter that was sent to you, could you help us understand the scope of the dispute? Is there really a dispute? To what extent are there discussions between the two countries on this matter? Thank you. It was raised by the administration, as your colleague said, on a few occasions, not systematically. And every time that this issue was raised, it was to transmit or express the concerns of Mr. Higgins. It wasn't raised as being one of the files between the two countries. As you know, this committee has a lot of experience with the wide range of files that have to do with trade between Canada and the United States. So this was not one of the issues at stake. So would it be fair to say that this is a relatively minor dispute when it comes to the U.S.-Canada dynamic? Yes, not even. Thank you for the clarification. Let me now turn to Mr. Ive and Ms. Riddle. You are at the Department of Finance. Let's be clear. The idea of the principle of this tax, I believe, is beneficial because it could help reduce real estate speculation. We know that many major groups are looking for profit. They are not trying to lodge people who need accommodation, and they are looking at the bubble trends. This could avoid bubbles. This could also avoid artificial pricing. We have a situation where people are looking for totally empty buildings in front of them. Where there's an issue is that it's the first time since we were warned about this last year. It's the first time that Canada is interfering in real estate taxation. On your end, have any constitutional studies been carried out on this issue?
Aspects, along with, we provide advice to the minister on a lot of different aspects, so that would include the constitutional risks, the tax risks, all of the policy considerations. But unfortunately, we're not at liberty to discuss the advice we would have given the minister on that issue. But yes, it was considered.
So here you cannot tell us whether you received any notice confirming the constitutional nature of this new tax. That would be a first.
To that specific question, no, we have not received any notice.
OK, parfait.
Perfect. Were there any discussions with your counterparts in the provinces before the law or tax was introduced?
We, as officials, did not consult with the provinces prior to the introduction of the tax. Not specifically. I mean, the consultation was certainly open to any and all voices, so we would have very happily received any commentary that would have been provided by municipalities, provinces, areas, etc. However, very little, if any, was offered. Although, Rob, did you?
We didn't get anything from the provinces specifically, but we did get some submissions from a variety of municipalities throughout Canada.
Parfait, je vous remercie.
Thank you. If I'm not mistaken, this new tax was introduced in 2022, correct?
It's effective for the 2022 calendar year, so the conditions start applying as of January 2022, and the first returns are to be filed by April 30th, which was subsequently moved to October 31st, 2023.
Donc jusqu'à maintenant, avez-vous
So far, have you received any feedback on the impact of the tax? Has there been a pre-study, or is it too early? Has there been testimony? So what is the state of the tax now? What can you say about it now?
The tax is in effect. We are receiving feedback, like I said, because they've become aware of the tax, and for people that are negatively impacted, they're reaching out to us to let us know what their concerns are, and we're taking all of that into consideration, and we're briefing the minister accordingly.
Mais à l'inverse, avez-vous des échos?
But have you heard anything to the effect that real estate speculation will be reduced, that buildings will be freed up, and that there will be a positive impact on the market?
For the most part, the Department of Finance, and this isn't just the case for the underused housing tax, but for all taxes, we generally receive feedback in the negative sense, not in the positive sense. It's not too often we receive positive feedback.
Welcome to our live.
Okay. Thank you very much, Mr. Tremblay. Your time is up. On to Mr. Cannings for 6 minutes, please.
Well, thank you. Thank you for being here with us today. I represent a riding in British Columbia where we have the speculation and vacancy tax, which is quite similar to this, I would say. It has similar motives. It's a little different. It applies to both domestic and foreign owners, although there's a difference in the tax rate depending on what your status is there. It's been around, I think, 4 or 5 years now. I'm just wondering, was there any analysis done about how that was working? Because I know there's some good data from what Monsieur Savard-Tremblay was asking as to how it has affected the availability of homes and houses for locals to live in. I'm just wondering if there was any analysis of that tax and how it's doing before this one was brought in.
So I'll let Rob supplement my answer, but I will begin by saying that, in general at the federal level, there's a bit of a dearth of data on how this sort of tax might apply across Canada. But where there are instances of data available at the provincial level, absolutely, we certainly did take that into consideration. Rob, is there anything
The only
to add?
thing I would add is the experience in BC was used in developing our costing of the measure, but beyond that, it wasn't really something that was taken into account.
But I would say the real difference between this and the BC tax is that BC tax, basically the government chose areas that were being impacted more intensely by soaring housing rates, low availability of rentals, etc. So it was mainly the big urban centers. I mean, in my riding, it's not applicable at all, even though there are cities of 50,000, 30,000, 10,000, etc. And I'm just wondering if some of the concerns about this tax could be addressed in that way.
The way I would answer that is when it comes to a municipally imposed tax, they have much more information and much more control to have the tax apply in very specific areas. When you're applying a tax at the federal level, it needs to be applied consistently across Canada. So we tried to introduce rules that would apply consistently across Canada based on population statistics, and that was the approach that we took to try to get as much consistency and fairness across the various regions, which are quite different from province to province to province.
So you couldn't use statistics across Canada such as housing availability or the increase in housing prices, something like that would trigger it rather than just whether you're in a municipal or census municipal area.
Well, Rob, you can take this maybe a bit further, but when you're developing a tax, it generally has to apply consistently, and you have to use consistent and understandable measures across the country. And so we chose rules that were consistent and measurable across the country. Rob, would you like to supplement?
I mean, as a tax, as a exercise of the federal taxation power, the primary purpose of the measure is to raise revenues, and the government decided to apply the tax on a national basis, and that was a decision that the government took.
And if there's any ideas of changing the tax or adjusting how it's implemented, would that be done through changes in regulation, or would it have to come back for amendment? What would that process be like?
There are broad regulation-making powers under the UHT Act. The legislation can also be amended as Parliament sees fit. Those are decisions that the government and Parliament must make.
Okay, still got a minute. You talked about the feedback that you'd got and that you hadn't received any from the Niagara region. Where did you get feedback from, and what was that feedback in general terms?
On the specific issue of resort and tourism communities, which was part of the consultation, we received representations from property owners with properties in Prince Edward Island, Nova Scotia, certain areas of Ontario that were not the Niagara region, Whistler, British Columbia, as well as a small community. I can't remember the name of it, but it was a rural area in BC. Those are the ones that I can recall.
Okay, and they were concerned that they would be captured under these things, but they thought of this as more of a vacation home situation.
Precisely. They were just raising concerns that perhaps they'd have to sell their vacation property to avoid the 1% tax on the value of their vacation home.
Thank you very much, Mr. Cannings. On to Mr. Seaback for 5 minutes, please.
Great. Thank you, Madam Chair. So why would you not just be able to simply sign the form saying I have an exemption instead of having to go through and fill out all kinds of information about your property, including values which you may not know, and then click a box at the end that says I have an exemption? Wouldn't it just make more sense and make it easier for Canadians if you just, at the start of the form, clicked I have this exemption, for example? It's a seasonal property that's not winterized.
So the question is partly, I guess, directed to the CRA, given that they are responsible for the administration and enforcement of the tax. But perhaps I can comment briefly. The form is 7 pages long, but a significant portion of that is listing the exemptions that are available to property owners. If someone is entitled to an exemption, I am under the understanding that CRA's policy is that the value of the property does not have to be provided in the return. It's the basic property information like the name of the owner, the address of the property, and things like that are required to be provided, but the information that's being requested is actually fairly minimal.
So how much money is this supposed to raise? You said the goal is to raise revenue to create affordable housing, or one of the goals. How much is it estimated that this is going to raise?
Yeah, so I want to make sure I have the right figures here. So the department estimated that the UHT would raise approximately $875 million over the fiscal planning period beginning 2022-23 to 2027-28, and $140 million annually thereafter.
And how many returns, paper returns, is it estimated that are going to be filed?
I can't comment on the number of paper returns that are going.
Because you can only file a paper return, right? This is the form.
The return can be filed electronically as well as by paper. I believe currently there's somewhere in the neighborhood of a fairly even split between paper and electronic forms, but
And
you'd have to.
How much is it?
official.
Do you have an estimate how much it's going to cost to administer all of this? Because it's going to be millions of forms that are being sent into the government for this tax.
I can't answer that question. It would have to be a question directed at CRA officials. They're best placed to answer that.
So when you develop this policy, did you not look at what the cost benefit of this would be? We're going to have X amount of revenue, but internally it's going to cost Y. Therefore, X minus Y is the actual amount of money that's going to be available for allegedly for affordable housing. That wasn't part of the policy consideration.
When it comes to, like I said, when we're briefing the minister, we brief the minister on absolutely all aspects of the tax, and you can imagine all relevant considerations such as cost-benefit analysis or something that are included in our briefing. So yes, the minister would have been briefed on.
But you don't have those estimates here today.
It's just not something that I'm at liberty to provide, unfortunately, because it forms part of the advice to the minister. I apologize. I'm not trying to be awkward. It's just that as officials, the advice of the minister is confidential, and it's not. We're just not at liberty to discuss it.
Okay. So, given the lack of knowledge of this tax, I mean, how are you going to measure compliance? Right, this is supposed to target. You were saying non-residents effectively, right? That's what we're mostly looking at. But Canadians who may have to fill out this form as well. So how do you have any idea to measure compliance? Like who's actually filled this out when they should have? Because as you said, you don't have access to any municipal databases and an index of properties.
CRA has a variety of mechanisms that it uses to ensure compliance with Canada's tax statutes. With respect to the specifics of this particular measure, if you're interested in how the CRA intends to go about administering and enforcing the tax, I would suggest the committee speak to CRA officials about that question.
Okay, thank you very much, Mr. Seebeck. Sorry, your 5 minutes is up. Mr. Varani, please.
Thank you very much. Ms. Riddell, at the outset of your comments, you talked about the census metropolitan area and the census agglomeration, I think you said, and you said so if an entity or a location of a house is designated as rural, it's exempt, and how you define rural is based on this CMA or CA sort of definition. So I'm just going to ask you some questions here. So this is a line drawing exercise, right? Inevitably, when there's a line that's drawn, some people are on one side of the line getting exempted, some people are on the other side of the line and they are not exempted. That's fair?
Yes, that's fair.
And you mentioned specifically that there's even within the CMA-CA fold, if you're sort of in the rural part of a CA or a CMA, you may be exempted, which might explain some of the questions you heard earlier about why a house 400 meters away is on one side versus the other. It's just because a line had to be drawn somewhere.
Yeah, that's exactly it.
Okay, and here the line drawing was used because I presume you're trying to come up with some proxy for dividing urban versus rural, and it is in urban areas where we have the most sensitive issue about housing shortages. So that's what we're targeting with the UHT. Is that fair?
Yes, that's fair.
Okay, but I also understand that the census metropolitan area as this notion or formula, that's not unknown to the Government of Canada, that is a StatsCan definition that is a long-standing definition that's used in other areas. Is that fair?
Yes, that's fair.
Okay. So I'm going to turn it over to Mr. Sheehan to continue the questioning. Over to you, Terry.
Well, thank you very much, and thank you for your presentation. And so I'm going to pick up a little bit where Kyle was going about the 1% versus, say, a 2% or 3%. If it is, something that we're looking at doing, what would be the advantages of increasing from 1% to 2% or 3%?
The decision to go with 1% was a decision for the minister. So that's a question you should probably have for the minister.
Okay, fair enough. But so we're talking a lot about Ontario cottages, and the term cottages for people south of Northern Ontario, we call them camps, and that's a big distinction. Bit of a joke, but the camps up in, say, Northern Ontario, the prices of cottages, camps in Ontario are about $300,000 to $800,000 on average. Sure, we have $800,000 camps up in Northern Ontario, but a lot of them are around the $300,000 mark. When you talk about Northern Ontario, you talk about Parry Sounds, Muskoka, and you start talking about Port Carling. I went to a corn fest there once, and wow, there were like Rolls Royces pulling up. It's a very rich area, and there's this functioning thing, and this is before all of this. And I've been involved in local politics for about 26 years. On the school board and then on city council. And it was about assessment. So MPAC, along with the mill rate, sets the tax rate. And, when there is a bunch of activity where people are buying homes, it has the process of raising taxes for everybody in, Canadian ratepayers and everyone. How exactly do you guys determine the 1% on what value? Is it through an assessment corporation like MPAC? Is it through another process to you?
For the question, the 1% applies on the greater of the assessed value for municipal taxation purposes and the property's most recent sales price. There is the ability of a property owner, if they disagree with the use of either of those, to use the fair market value of the property by way of an election.
Okay, fair enough. And the last one is Congressman Brian Higgins, who is just a stellar individual, did a lot of work against Trump on the 232 tariffs. And I'd asked him the question if he was aware of the exemption about the 28 days, and he was not, because he was really talking about a very specific group of people. Could you please explain to the committee again the 28-day exemption? And because I think a lot of people may be exempt that just aren't aware. And is there retroactivity to go back and to file and say, well, I just wasn't aware that I was exempt?
Thank you for the question. So the exemption that has the 28-day component is the so-called vacation property exemption, which is available in certain areas of the country. As was mentioned earlier, to qualify for that exemption, it has to meet both the location test and the use test. I believe it was described already, but I can go over it again. The property has to be located in an area of Canada that is the rural part of a census metropolitan area or a census agglomeration having 30,000.
Is there retroactivity? Would there be retroactivity, say, if you did not file in this year, 2022, 2023, and you just kind of like realize that I could have, been exempt?
It's sort of a question that you would need to ask the Canada Revenue Agency, but I suppose that if someone filed a return on the basis that they had tax owing and then discovered after the fact that they actually were eligible for an exemption, that the person could file an amended return with the CRA to correct that fact.
Thank you very much. Under Mr. Savard-Tremblay for 2.5 minutes, please.
Merci, Madame la Présidente.
Thank you, Chair. We also received comments from farmers who told us that they are also concerned. They are concerned by this underused housing tax. The obligations to lodge foreign and seasonal workers find them with unused housing. So even when they are exempted, they are bound to file tax returns, and sometimes the costs are between $500 and $1,000, whereas their realities are already difficult. Where there are officially exemptions for the production of tax returns, will this have an impact on tax revenue? Do you have an idea on how that could be assessed or estimated?
Thank you for the question. So when it comes to farmers, if a farmer owns a residential property, a Canadian farmer, in their own name, there is no UHT filing requirement as they're an excluded owner, as a Canadian citizen or permanent resident of Canada. Where the issue comes up is where a farm is incorporated and the residential property is held under the title of the corporation. The Department of Finance is aware of a number of concerns about the filing requirement, despite the fact that farmers, corporate farmers, would otherwise qualify for an exemption. We are looking at those issues and are briefing the Minister of Finance on that.
27 seconds.
Parce que nous avons...
We have this brief from the Canadian Federation of Farmers telling us that farmers are required to file tax returns.
As mentioned, if the farmer owns the property individually, they are not required to file. But again, if it's a farmer that's operating as a corporation, then currently the requirement is that they need to file in respect of any residential property that they own.
Thank you very much. Mr. Cannings for 2.5 minutes.
Well, thank you. I'm just trying to dive down into this way we could maybe improve the definitions here on a national scale. We had Representative Higgins before us a couple of days ago who basically said, these are vacation homes, they're cottages. If you looked at it, you'd know that's what it was. And I immediately thought, well, it'd be kind of hard to define in legal terms. Is there any way that you could set, a ratio of, say, the assessed value of a home versus the average assessed value in that region or something? Would that be too in the weeds for finance to look at?
Again, we're kind of tripping into advice to the minister here, so we have to be careful about what we say, but we are taking all of the feedback into consideration, and we'll be briefing the minister on that feedback.
Yeah, I'm just trying to think where I was going to go with this, and I've totally lost my train of thought. But, I guess I'm trying to find some sort of way here where we can maybe smooth out these sharp lines that Mr. Virani was talking about if you're on one line of a geographical boundary. Because this is an issue. I represent a riding on the border. I have never heard of this issue before. No one has ever come to me to complain, and I don't know. It seems that the history of the Lake Erie shoreline that Mr. Baldinelli represents is very different from where I am, and I'm just trying to find out where we could change that. And if I have a few seconds left, what would be the process of the feedback and changing? I tried to get at this earlier, but is there a way that it could just be changed in regulation without having to come back to us?
I think it depends on what specifically is being changed, because the UHT Act is mostly set out in legislation, but certain of the legislative sections provide quite a wide scope for doing quite a bit of things under regulation. So we'd have to look at if there were changes to be made and that was something that the government desired to do, we'd have to take a look at those specific things and if they could be accomplished by way of regulation. That would obviously be the more desirable way to go.
Ask, and that is there any double jeopardy here if you're in BC and you're a foreign owner and you're paying 2% annual tax and now you have to pay 3%? So that's what they're facing?
Do you mean if you're in one area that's subject to multiple levels of tax? Yes, they accumulate.
Yeah. Okay.
Yeah.
Thank you.
Thank you very much. We have two members in order to finish this round, so I'm going to just say 3 minutes each so that Mr. Carey has an opportunity to ask some questions, and Mr. Arya.
Thank you, Madam Chair. I've got lots of questions, but so Madame Riddell, you're the director, you would have been responsible for drafting this new taxation, or your department would be, and Mr. Ives, you would have been your titled expert advisor, right? And you'd be giving advice to Madame Riddell. Is that what your role is, or was?
I report to Amanda, correct?
Perfect, okay. So I was really concerned when you said you dropped the consultation on August the 6th, 2021. Like if I was a minister, I didn't want people to give me a response, I would drop it in the middle of the summer. And then to put on top of it, August 15th was when the Prime Minister dropped the writ for the election. So probably a lot of people didn't pay attention to it. And I don't know how many followers you have, but we're talking about friends, neighbors. A lot of them have been coming to Canada for many, many years, and I don't think they were aware of it. But they are now, and out of these 41 submissions that you got, are these submissions, are they totally public? Like, can we get a copy of that? Mr. Ives?
I'll take that. No, the submissions are not public.
Okay.
Submissions are given to us. We would need to request, it'd be
Okay.
through an ATIP, for example, we'd have to request
No, it's
permission.
okay.
of the-
I only got 3 minutes.
Yeah.
But now, Mr. Ives, you're the expert advisor. Who did you reach out to get expert advice on this new taxation? Because has the minister even talked to you guys about maybe coming up with a fix for this? Have you been given direction for that?
Again, we're getting into advice to the minister. We are in regular
I don't want the
commu-
advice, just has she asked you to actually see if you can fix this thing?
That's between us and the minister,
Oh,
I'm
it is,
sorry.
okay.
Yes.
Mr. Ives, who did you reach out to proactively to get expert advice to give to Madame Riddell?
The way that the consultation was laid out was a open consultation where any interested party could make a
Who
submission.
did you reach out to? Did you reach out to anyone?
That was not the form of consultation that the government decided to proceed
So the
with.
government just went, this is what we're doing, and you guys could...
It was announced in Budget 2021 that a consultation would be forthcoming, and that consultation took place between the dates of August 6th and September 16th, I believe.
To the original proposal based on the advice that Mr. Ives was able to come up with to give you improvements based on those consultations, Madame Riddell?
Sorry, can you clarify the question?
Okay, you had an initial proposal, went out for consultation, you got feedback.
Yes.
Did you change the initial after you got the feedback?
Yes, there were changes with respect to, the feedback did generate some changes.
Are we able to get a copy of the original and the fixed one, or?
We're
improvement?
certainly happy to provide you a copy of the consultation backgrounder as well as the final
Thank you very
UHD
much,
Act.
Mr. Carey. On to Mr. Arya for 3 minutes, please.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Mr. Allen, when Representative Higgin was attended the committee meeting last time, he mentioned that he had written to United States Trade Representative, and the trade representative had raised this issue with the Canadian minister. When I specifically asked him what was the opinion, I mean, did the USTR agreed that this UHT is in violation of Kusuma? There was no clear answer. What do you say on that?
Well, as I said, it has been raised by the administration, conveying Congressman Higgins' concerns to members of the Canadian government at various levels. But so far, it has not been raised by the administration as a CUSMA matter.
So if it was a violation of Kusuma, probably would have heard it by now, correct?
I don't want to speculate about U.S. administration intentions, but they haven't raised it.
Okay. Ms. Riddle, foreign national, they don't have to file any tax returns until unless they earn any income in Canada. So the foreign owners of the properties that becomes applicable under UHT, so this is the only time, only for this purpose, they will have to file the tax returns, correct?
Yes, they're not filing an income tax return, they're filing the UHT return only.
UHT
Yep.
return, basically. What? It's a part of tax return.
If I may make
Yeah.
a clarification, if the foreign-owned property is generating income, obviously they'll be filing a T1.
I understand. Now, if we assume that none of them were exempt from the 28-day stay rule, How many properties across Canada will fall under this?
I'm trying to look for the exact number.
Approximately.
Go ahead.
I can take the question.
Yeah.
The revenue projection for UHT is based on approximately 30 to 35,000 properties being subject to the tax.
Okay, subject to the tax. That is, you had also estimated part of them will get exempted under this 28-day stay rule, correct?
So the UHT revenue projections are based on a total of 3% of the Canadian residential property world being owned by the owners that are subject to this tax. So it's approximately 10% of that 3% that the tax would apply to.
Okay, I'm sorry, Mr. Arya, the time is up. I want to thank the witnesses for appearing today. I think you have supplied us with some very valuable information, so thank you very much. We will suspend for a minute in order for our other panel to come on. We have as individuals with us homeowner Mr. Robert Ketterman. Then we have Mayor Wayne Reddycop for the town of Fort Erie, and Lori Wright, the homeowner. Mr. Ketterman, we're having problems. We apparently we can hear you, but we can't see you. So I'm going to turn the floor over to you for 5 minutes, please.
Perfect. Thank you. Can you hear me now?
Yes, we can. Please go ahead.
Great. Thank you so much. Good afternoon, everybody. My name is Rob Ketterman. Thank you for allowing me to address the committee on the subject of the underused housing tax. I'm an American whose family has owned cottage in Crystal Beach, Fort Erie, Ontario since 1913. Fort Erie is located directly across the Niagara River from Buffalo, New York. The identity of these two communities has been defined by the extensive population of families who have deep roots on both sides of the border. So deep, in fact, that the bike trail that runs 20 miles from Port Colborne, Ontario to the Peace Bridge border crossing is called the Friendship Trail. Friendship referring to the relationship between our two countries. My wife, Gloria, and I still own one of the cottages that was purchased by my great-great-grandmother in 1927. We live in our cottage for about 4 months during the summer, and use it extensively on weekends throughout the year. My family has been an integral part of the Crystal Beach community for 6 generations. Each time the cottages have been transferred to the next generation, we have paid a significant capital gains tax to the CRA, and we continue to contribute tens of thousands of dollars every year to the local economy. Despite this, we have now become a target of the underused housing tax that has been publicly touted as designed to, quote, take steps to ensure that foreign non-residents who simply use Canada as a place to passively store their wealth and housing pay their fair share, end of quote. Minister of Finance Christina Freeland said, quote, we will prevent foreign buyers from parking their money in Canada by buying up homes. We will make sure that houses are being used as homes rather than as commodities to be traded, end of quote. Certainly, we support the Canadian government's effort to address the problem of foreign investors exploiting the Canadian real estate market exclusively for financial gain. However, this legislation is carelessly and unfairly including American cottage owners like ourselves who actively use their properties and were not cited as the reason for this new law. Honestly, this feels discriminatory, punitive, and abusive. Our cottage is a home for us. It's a home for us, arguably more of a home to my family than any home we have ever owned in the U.S. Applying this tax to us is not in the spirit of the relationship that our two countries have enjoyed for well over a century. The problem is the exemptions. They're short-sighted and inequitable. They only offer an exemption for a portion of property owners who should not even be subject to this tax in the first place. More specifically, vacation properties that are located in certain postal codes that have a higher population density than others are not exempt from paying this tax. Whether the property is located in a certain postal code has no bearing on how the owner actually uses their residence. Why should we be required to pay this tax when we actively stay in our property for 120 days each year, and someone whose property is not used nearly as much but located 2 miles away in a different postal code be exempt? Honestly, this sounds absurd. Further, the house immediately next door to me is owned by a Canadian couple who live in Niagara Falls, Ontario, just 15 miles away. They rarely stay there. They have openly told me that they only own the property because they view it as an investment that will increase in value. That's a true example of a property that is underused and not lived in. With regards to Crystal Beach, any reasonable person would not consider that it is urban, despite the population density in this tiny area of only 4.4 square miles. Certainly, the property values have increased substantially here over the past few years, especially during COVID. This has been almost entirely driven by Canadian buyers from the Greater Toronto area who have migrated, speculated, and become absentee Airbnb landlords. This situation has not been caused by American cottage owners who have been here for many years. We have submitted the required UHT tax form and claim the exemption that our property is not suitable as year-round residence. However, there's no clear definition of what this means or the specific requirements. While our house has heat, there is no basement, just a crawl space over sand where much of the plumbing is exposed to freezing temperatures, so we must shut off the water for parts of the winter. We are hopeful that this will not be scrutinized and rejected. Being forced to pay this tax would significantly increase the cost of owning our Canadian property. In fact, the next property assessment is completed, our annual costs will nearly triple, which would likely force us to make the heartbreaking decision to sell something that has been a central part of my family's life for over a century. it will simply become unaffordable to keep. My story is just one of hundreds in the Fort Erie area, and I would guess thousands across Canada. If the law does in fact continue as it is, this will be a very sad chapter in the history of this town and of our two great countries. Likely a final chapter for many Americans who will reluctantly choose to sell and never set foot in Canada again. In closing, we are thankful that the committee is taking action to reconsider the impacts of this tax on border communities, and hopeful that your efforts will result in either repealing this tax on Americans or fixing the issues that are unfairly impacting Americans who are not supposed to be the intended target. Finally, somebody is listening. Thank you for your consideration.
Thank you very much, Mr. Kitterman, for your comments. On to Mayor Reddycop, please, for up to 5 minutes.
Thank you very much. My name is Wayne H. Reddycop. I'm the mayor of the town of Fort Erie and have been for nearly 18 of the past 25 years. I grew up in Fort Erie and have lived there for my entire life, with the exception of when I've pursued my education. I'm a lawyer by profession and practiced law for nearly 46 years. One of my summer jobs for 4 years as a student was as a customs officer at the Peace Bridge, which connects Fort Erie with Buffalo, New York. I served with the Board of Trustees of Duville College, now a university in Buffalo, New York, between 2007 and 2015, the last 2 years as chairman of the board. I'm very familiar with my community and the dynamic of the Canada-United States border as it relates to people and trade. One of my grandmothers was born in the United States, in Buffalo, New York. I can trace my ancestry through my American relatives back to the Mayflower. As a youth, I visited family living in Western New York and associated with many Americans who spend summers with their families in Fort Erie as seasonal residents. The development of friendships and relationships continues to be the reality in what can best be described as our binational region. In fact, it is typical for many who grew up in South Niagara and Western New York to have family and friends on both sides of the international border. On February 21st, 2023, I corresponded with Minister Chrystia Freeland on the underused housing tax. I did so because there are approximately 900 properties in Fort Erie that are owned by United States residents or citizens. That number constitutes about 6% of the housing stock in Fort Erie. The vast majority of those properties have been used and owned by families, some for multiple generations, as Mr. Ketterman has indicated. Some are cottages in the familiar sense. Others are large homes located on Lake Erie. All are typically used by the owners and their families as seasonal residents. The underused housing tax is causing great anxiety, anger, disappointment, and uncertainty among Fort Erie's American seasonal residents. These are individuals who are not only good friends and relatives in many cases, but also participants and supporters of local programs, activities, and events. They're important customers of our local businesses. They are a vital element to the richness of life in our community. The fluidity of frequent travelers across the border between Niagara and Western New York is a testament to the closeness of relationships between the people of our two countries, the greatest friends, allies, and trading partners in the world. They are the living symbols of that relationship. I understand that the purpose of the tax was to prevent offshore investors from acquiring Canadian residences and taking them off the market for those in need of permanent housing. We all recognize the need for more housing units as the population of our country grows. As the tax relates to our American seasonal residents, it misses the mark. These seasonal residences have never been part of the community's permanent housing market and were not acquired for investment purposes. They are not owned by individuals or corporations that have no other connection to our community or expect to capitalize on the stressed housing market. They are owned by families that are considered to be part of our community in every sense. In truth, the acquisition of housing units in Fort Erie by others who do not live in our municipality, although based in Canada, used for short-term rental purposes, represents a greater challenge affecting the need for housing in our community. Perversely, the underused housing tax advantages those investors and could result in more opportunities for them to invest in property in Fort Erie and elsewhere as our American friends and relatives decide that they cannot afford the new tax and choose to sell their properties. That would be incredibly unfortunate at the expense of inadvertently punishing individuals and families who have been part of the life in our community for generations. The government of Canada would benefit Canadian-based investors with no interest in our community other than the business opportunity. There could not be a worse result, the true example of an unintended consequence. The exemptions provided for in the legislation are inadequate to provide relief for most of the Fort Erie American seasonal residents who own their own homes. Fort Erie, a municipality of 33,000 people, is part of the St. Catharines Niagara Census Metropolitan Area. The municipality is a mix of urban and rural areas containing several population centers which align with our urban boundaries. My understanding of the new legislation provides that the seasonal homes within the urban boundaries of Fort Erie are subject to the underused housing tax, whereas those that are located outside our urban boundaries are not. That in itself highlights the unfairness regarding the tax. I would suggest that one solution to rectify this problem would be to change the exemption provision so that regardless whether the property is inside or outside the urban boundary, the property is exempt if the owner or his or her spouse occupies the property for at least 3 months of the year. The tax would then capture anyone who has acquired a house for investment or commercial purposes while providing relief to those who use a house as a seasonal family residence. It would also diffuse the simmering anger of our American neighbors who will bear the brunt of this tax and the reporting mechanism contained in the legislation. Many of our seasonal residents continue to have little, if any, knowledge of the reporting requirement of the tax and will be subject to extraordinary penalties for simply owning property that the federal government has classified for special taxation. Unless the federal government intends to reach out to its property owner, all property owners affected by the underused housing tax, the town of Fort Erie is willing to assist it to notify these property owners of any filing requirement or changes to the legislation or regulations. This is an extremely important matter for not only our seasonal residents, but for our community. Thank you for providing me the opportunity to address you today and for your consideration of changes to the exemption provisions in the legislation and the need to provide clear, concise, and timely information to the affected property owners. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Mayor Reddycop. On to Ms. Wright for up to 5 minutes, please. Can you take your mute button off, Ms. Wright?
There we go. Sorry about that. My name is Lori Wright, and my husband Doug and I are American homeowners here in Canada. We own a single-family property along the southern shore of Ontario in Point Avenue. Our home is just one of two other family properties that date back to when my family purchased here in 1905. The original farmhouse still stands on the lakefront along with a barn and an old ice house. I grew up spending every summer here in Canada. As a child, I didn't even realize that Canada was a different country. That's how close our border is to my hometown of Buffalo, New York. We have 3 children, and my family also spends every summer here and considers our Canadian cottage our home. We support local businesses and tradesmen who do work on our homes, and we eat in the local restaurants and support the local markets and farmers. I strongly believe in supporting these local businesses. We spend almost 160 days here from mid-May to mid-October, and now we winter in Florida. My husband and I planned our retirement to be both in Florida and here in Canada. This is why it's so upsetting that this 1% underused housing tax has been imposed on Americans in this border town. It is affecting many of my friends and family along this shoreline. And last summer, we read that there was this huge housing shortage all over Canada. We understand what a large problem that is to solve. When we were learning more and more about this new tax on foreign homeowners, we really didn't think that the intention was to tax American cottage owners along this region. It seems that there are many foreign investors that come in and buy a property that they just use to invest money here in Canada, and mostly that's in larger cities like Toronto and Vancouver. We're not those people. We consider it a privilege to spend our summers here. As last summer went on, we learned the law had been passed, but the details had not yet been figured out. The more and more we learned about this legislation, it was really kind of confusing. We had so many questions like, how do we know if we even qualify for this? Will they send us a tax bill? There were so many vague directions and no clear answers. It was unclear how many of us summer residents this tax would actually affect. As the year rolled out this year, we knew that we had to do something quickly to get our tax ID numbers, as rumor had it that there'd be weeks before we would even receive a tax ID number. To add to our confusion, we had found out that our neighbors just across the street from us do not have to pay the 1% UHT, as they are considered rural. They live about 450 meters from my driveway, and if I understand correctly, the qualifications are being based on the CMA census tract of St. Catharines. The homes across the street are considered rural, but my side of the street, not rural. The boundaries just didn't make any sense. And so I attached a map that I think the clerk gave to the committee for reference. I'd like to go back to our history, though, here along the shoreline, and my friendships with many Canadians that have been fostered for many years. And being from a border town like Buffalo, New York, we have Canadians who travel to our region in Ellicottville to ski, and then down to Florida in the winter as snowbirds like my husband and myself. We see many Ontario plates all over the United States, and many of our Canadian friends we see over the winter in Florida while they're residing in their winter residences. It's nice to have dinner with them or play a game of golf while they're in Florida, and I think our friendships really go beyond our borders. We love our Canadian home. We consider it just that, our home, not our financial investment. We want to continue our plan of being retired here and supporting the local community and watching our children and grandchildren carry on that tradition of spending summers along the shores of Lake Erie. The 1% UHT is not friendly to the Americans who live along this region. It's an ugly can of worms that's just not friendly at all. We hope that you understand how negatively this is affecting us. Thank you to the members of Parliament, especially Tony Baldinelli and the House of Commons, for taking the time this afternoon to hear our frustrations with this tax and your consideration to fix it. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Ms. Wright. And we're very happy to have you living in Canada as well. So on to Mr. Baldinelli. If we're going to try to get full round one, how about we do 5 minutes rather than 6 to try to get everybody an opportunity in the first round. So Mr. Baldinelli, 5 minutes, please.
Thank you, Madam Chair, and thank you, Mayor Redekop and Mr. Kedman and Ms. Wright for attending this afternoon and sharing your stories. I'm going to go first to Mayor Redekop. It was interesting. We had finance officials here earlier, and they talked about they started the consultation process in August of 2001. I mean, essentially right before our federal election campaign, which was called on August 15th. Was your office or your staff aware of the consultation process that was being undertaken by the federal government on the UHT?
I'm going to say that I had some knowledge. I'm not going to say that we were provided direct notification from the government, but we had, the world that I live in, we have to keep our eye on these things. So we had some understanding that this was being contemplated, but I actually discounted it. I really didn't think that it would come to the American seasonal residents as being taxed in this fashion. So I was aware of it, but certainly not officially.
Now, we've spoken to Representative Higgins, and he said his office had been contacted by about 400 residents or constituents. I mean, how has your office dealt with the calls? Have you received many in that regard?
We've received many, and we've taken the position that we will support changes to this tax as it relates to our American seasonal residents. As I said, we have 900 properties in Fort Erie that are owned by Americans, and they're part of our community. So they pay taxes. They pay the property taxes just like everyone else based on the value of their homes. Some of these homes are very valuable homes. They're valuable, of course, to the families, but in terms of taxation, they carry a heavy tax burden, and so they provide us for some of the taxes that we rely upon. But more importantly, they're part of our community. As Ms. Wright had mentioned, they do support our local businesses. They do participate in our festivals. They go to our library. They're patrons of many of the social activities that go on in our community. And so we consider them to be, as I said, part of our community in every sense of the way. So we provided them with the support. As I said, I corresponded with the minister. I've had numerous conversations with both yourself and MP Vance Badaway, who's in the next riding on Lake Erie. And so any support that we can provide, we've been prepared to do that, including assisting the government in notifying our seasonal residents of any time that they
Thank you, Mayor
any
Redekop.
information they would need.
Thank you on that. I've just got limited time. I just want to ask Mr. Ketman and Ms. Wright. We had, spoken to finance officials. Essentially, they came up with the policy idea, and the implementation was left to CRA. Mr. Ketman, you were the first person who actually wrote to me in February of 2022 with regards to your concerns, and I immediately wrote to the minister's office in March of that year as well. I mean, and since that time, we're still looking for clarification and some answers to the questions. And I'm just wondering to both of you, how has it been trying to deal with CRA to get some answers?
I don't know if Rob, go ahead first.
Sure. Thank you, Lori. Thank you, Tony. I've written countless emails to elected officials all the way up to Prime Minister Trudeau, Finance Minister Christina Freeland, and others that I've been told would have a play in this, including the CRA. In most cases, I didn't even receive the courtesy of a reply. In some cases, there was an auto-generated reply. We've received it, your email, thank you, and whatever the rest of the language was. So honestly, Tony, it's been extremely frustrating just to be heard. And that, as I said in my statement, I'm so grateful. And I can attest for everyone in this community. And Lori and I know many, many, many people in this community that are thankful that that you've taken the initiative to work on this.
Ms. Wright?
Yes. So last summer, I too wrote emails to Prime Minister Trudeau, the Minister of Finance. There was so much confusion as to how this tax was going to be executed, and then I kind of gave up. It was so frustrating. I did receive automated email responses, but nobody really to help us. Richard Halinda, he's a local barrister here that we used, and he gave us some advice, but it's been very confusing.
Thank you, Ms. Wright. Mr. Varani for 5 minutes, please.
Thank you, Madam Chair. So I appreciate the witnesses coming forward. I'm just going to make a couple of observations. That I'm sensing some frustration from both Ms. Wright and Ms. Ketterman with respect to sort of perceived lack of responsiveness on the part of Canadian representatives. But I just, with the utmost of respect, just point out that the operation of representative democracy is no different in Canada as it is in the United States. So, and what I mean by that is that the responsibility of elected representatives such as myself or the Prime Minister or the Minister of Finance is to respond to the concerns of people that elected them in their ridings or people that are in Canada. And I think that's the way it operates in the United States as it operates here, and that's as it should be. That's whom you're accountable to. I just want to then now turn to a question to Mr. Mayor Redekop. I just wanted to make sure I heard you correct in saying that you were aware of the consultations taking place, but you chose not to participate in them. Is that what you said in terms of questioning to Mr. Baldinelli?
I heard that there was, I was given no formal notification. I'd heard that this was being contemplated by the government.
And you learned that through the announcement in the campaign platform or the announcement in the budget? How did you hear about the consultations?
I probably maybe read something in a newspaper or something of that nature. Certainly nothing of a formal nature.
Okay.
And by the way, I corresponded with Minister Freeland February 21st, 2023. I haven't received a response. Okay. And I do live in Canada.
And that's important, Mayor Redekop, and that's something that should be responded to. There's no disputing that component. But I also heard you say, Mayor Redekop, that I think you said this, and I think some of the other witnesses said that obviously housing shortages are an issue. but you also suggested that your remedy would be just simply a usage phenomenon. So if I understood you correctly, you said there shouldn't be a rural-urban divide in the way this policy is implemented. It should just be 90 days of usage means you're exempt. Is that what you said earlier to the committee?
Yeah, and that was based on the fact that the way it stands right now, as Ms. Wright has mentioned, you've got American seasonal owners who, if they live within the urban boundary, are subject to the tax. If they live outside the urban boundary, and we have large areas that are outside our urban boundaries, you're not subject to the tax. All of these American seasonal residents spend 3 months, 4 months, weekends during the off season, during holidays. So if you were to utilize a time frame, 3 months is what I suggested, you're likely going to cover all of the American seasonal residents that are committed to utilizing their properties for their family use. And then you're going to eliminate anyone who's utilizing the property solely for investment purposes.
And Mayor Redekop, if I could just continue with it, though, that the extrapolation of what you're saying is that if it's based purely on usage and not based on a rural-urban divide, then a person who lives in whatever country, whether it's the United States or Austria for that matter, who has a condominium in downtown Toronto or downtown Vancouver or downtown Calgary or downtown Montreal, and they use it for 90 days out of 365, they would be exempted from this tax. That's your proposal?
That would be, I'm concerned about Fort Erie, but if you're talking about people that are taking property out of a housing market, you've got to have some parameter. And the example that I used was the American seasonal residents who are occupying the property, they're contributing to our community, as opposed to the investors who are utilizing their properties for short-term rentals. Clearly commercial purpose within a residential area. They're not part of our community and in fact create more difficulties sometimes than they resolve. And they are definitely taking houses out of the existing housing market for investment purposes. Whereas these American seasonal residents these homes have never really been part of our housing market, strictly speaking, for people who live here because they've been utilized as seasonal residences by our American neighbors.
I appreciate you're talking about Fort Erie, but we're trying to craft policy and perfect policy that's for the entire nation. And I didn't really hear an answer to the question because it seems to me when you talk about a straight usage criterion of 90 days that would apply around the country, it would do exactly that. It would exempt a downtown Toronto condominium that's used 90 days of the year from any sort of unused housing tax, and that's in fact exactly what this tax is trying to address, something that is unused, that is depriving people in the city that I represent. So I'll stand up now for the city that I represent, which is Toronto. I'm an MP from Toronto, that is suffering an acute housing shortage.
Well, I don't know what the situation is in Toronto, but if you've got someone occupying the property for 90 days, then that means there's at least 90 days when they're utilizing it. What are they doing for the rest of the period of time? I don't know that.
Okay, thank you very much. On to Mr. Savard-Tremblay for 5 minutes.
Merci, Madame la Présidente.
Thank you, Chair. Mr. Mayor, in your region, what's the vacancy rate for housing?
Well, there's virtually no vacancy rate. We have a shortage of housing. We're building houses, approving construction of new housing as quickly as possible. We've had record housing starts the last 7-8 years, and we're still finding that we have a need for housing, affordable housing in particular.
Because when we talk about vacancy, generally empty accommodation, do you have a percentage when it comes to residences that are used part-time by American owners?
We have, as I said, about 900 properties that are designated as being owned by American residents or citizens. We also have 250 properties that are licensed for short-term rentals and a waiting list of about 100. Those are properties typically that have been taken out of the housing market and are being utilized for commercial purposes. Some of the American-owned properties may be licensed for short-term rental, but it would be a very, very small number.
Et dites-moi, dans votre région, quels sont les...
In your region, are there any mechanisms for verifying to make sure that these residences are not really vacant, even though they exist on paper? And what is the mechanism? Is it a declaration?
We don't track the occupation of the homes owned by the Americans or the non-resident seasonal residents. We don't necessarily track the frequency of use of the short-term rental properties, but we know that they're not occupied on any basis by mostly by the owners. There would be a handful that would be occupied by the owners. Most of them are commercial enterprises. I'm sorry, I can't be more precise.
Avez-vous une idée sinon du nombre d'Américains qui...
Do you have an idea of the number of Americans who will be unfairly affected by this underused housing tax?
I could probably get that breakdown, and I would simply need to go to the addresses of these properties and figure out which ones are within the urban boundary and which ones are outside the urban boundary. I would say that the majority, though, would be within the urban boundary, and but there would still be a healthy number outside the urban boundary, but most of them would be within an urban boundary.
Parfait. Alors, si vous...
Perfect. If you were to give us figures, I will appreciate if you could send the information to this committee. Now, thank you. We are talking about exemptions very often for our neighboring Americans not to be victims of this tax. In a recent article by the CBC, you talked about an extension of the conditions for 3 months. Is that still your stand? Do you think that is sufficient?
I do, as long as it's a 3-month period of time occupation by the owner and not used for commercial purposes. I still stand by that.
Donc, écoutez, ça...
That is all for my questions. Thank you, Mr. Mayor.
Okay, thank you very much. Mr. Cannings, for 5 minutes, please.
Well, thank you, and thank you all for being here. I'd like to direct my questions at Mayor Redekop as well. The only connection I have to Fort Erie, I have to say, is my father used to live there in the 1930s, working for Fleet Aircraft, and then after the Second World War, he went back to the Okanagan Valley in British Columbia, where he was born and raised, and of course that's why I ended up being born and raised there and not Fort Erie. But in British Columbia, we have in 2018, the government brought in the speculation and vacancy tax, which is very similar in some ways to this tax. At least it has the same aims and in many ways the same mechanisms, but it works on a much more regional basis that carves in most of the big metropolitan centers where the housing price crisis is greatest, and leaves out a lot of the more rural areas, most of British Columbia, in fact, including the South Okanagan where I am, but it includes the Central Okanagan. So it takes that much more regional basis where there are boundaries, but I would say they're much bigger than the boundaries that I've seen with regards to this. So there's less kind of in and out. And I'm just wondering if you might comment. You talked about the exception for how long people would be resident there, but do you think that it would be possible for the government to bring in something like that on this tax? And I know with federal taxes it's a little different, but would that help the situation if the federal government said, look, this is really a problem more in places like Greater Toronto?
Well, I definitely think that there could be some revisions to the legislation that would cover the concern expressed by the member who represents the Toronto riding. Probably it's a greater problem in those larger cities, including Vancouver, I'm sure. It's a completely different dynamic along the border, as you've heard from Mr. Kedman, Ms. Wright. And so it's not a housing for us, because these American seasonal residences have never been part of our housing market, they're not really having an impact on the availability of housing or the affordability of housing in terms of our community. If they are in the larger centers, then definitely that's an issue that needs to be addressed. So there could be perhaps a greater focus on size of the community or something of that nature. I'm not crafting the legislation, but if I were to think about how to capture the real problem, I would identify where the real issue is occurring, what the extent of that problem is, and how best to target that as opposed to, so using a rifle as opposed to using a shotgun.
Right, and I was interested to hear your comments about, the housing situation in Fort Erie. It sounds very similar to the housing situation in my hometown of Penticton, where we have had record housing starts over the past few years. As a city representative told me recently, every day we're building more housing than we've ever built in Penticton, and every day we have fewer units of affordable housing. And that was, his way of saying we need a different tactic here. We need to build truly affordable housing. Is that the similar situation in Fort Erie?
It is, and I guess I would say that there is a connection here between these properties that are owned by the Americans, because if they go on the market and if they're purchased by Canadians for investment purposes, that in itself has an impact on the pricing, because investors will pay more for a house than a person who's going to live in it for their residence. Because if you're living in it as your residence, you're not thinking about your return on your investment, whereas an investor is. So we've seen that dynamic occur here, particularly with respect to the short-term rentals. So we're having similar problems here as you're experiencing in Penticton. And the big challenge for us is how do we manage all of this?
18 seconds.
Okay, well, I'll just comment that the difference between the BC, one of the big differences between the British Columbia speculation and vacancy tax and the unused housing tax federally is that both Canadians and foreign owners apply in British Columbia. So I'll leave it there.
Thank you very much. This ends round one. We have 10 minutes remaining. I could go on to the next two people we have in round two, if the committee wants to continue.
Madam Chair.
Yes.
If you would indulge me for some discussions on future meetings at the end of this.
Well, there's 10 minutes remaining in our schedule. So before I go into round two, otherwise I'm going into the first two speakers on round two, and that'll bring us to 5:30, and that'll be the end of the meeting.
Well, Madam Chair, then if we could thank our witnesses for attending, I'd like to discuss the possibilities of calling another meeting to discuss inviting CRA officials.
Okay, so to our witnesses, thank you very, very much. We very much appreciate you taking time out of your own busy schedules and sharing your concerns. We all heard them very clear. So thank you very much. We will disconnect now and go on to our other business.
Thank you to the witnesses.
Need to suspend again? No. Okay. Are they all gone? Just to make sure. Okay. All right. Okay. Mr. Baldinelli.
Thank you, Madam Chair. And thank you to my colleagues, first of all, for agreeing to hold the two sessions with regards to the UHA tax and its impact on border communities. I was just hopeful that, based on some of the commentary that we've heard, including today, with regards to having finance officials who have only crafted the policy but are not responsible for its implementation. What we've heard, not only from Mr. Ketterman, the example I've written to the minister like a year ago, and we're still working on trying to get clarification for a number of the residents with regards to the impact, as well as potential changes if they could be made. So I was hopeful that we at least have one more session where we could at least invite officials from CRA to come forward to discuss the UHT tax and its implementation and how they're working with residents. You know, I was disappointed in not having another chance to talk to Mr. Allen from Global Affairs, because I would have asked the question with regards to, you know, is the government aware, you know, of how many snowbirds do live in the United States? And there's 500,000 in Florida alone. And the impact. I mean, Mr. Higgins discusses the notion of, you know, he doesn't want this to be a race to the bottom, and I agree with him. But, I mean, if we're going to move forward, we're going to be taxing 900 residents in Fort Erie alone. I think Mr. Higgins is going to have some concerns with that. And what will the impact be on Canadians who reside in the United States? I didn't get a chance to ask Mr. Allen that question. I mean, and to me, it is more than just a minor concern. And so it's something that I think deserves at least one more hearing, and I was hopeful that my colleagues here would agree to that.
Thank you. I got Ms. Gladue, Mr. Aria, and then Mr. Carey, so we'll have to move it along. And Mr. Cannings.
Very good. Thank you, Chair. I would support having CRA come because I did have some questions about, for example, how are they going to verify the 28-day residency? Are they going to use CBSA information? Is that another resource that's needed? And then they had said 35,000 folks would be affected by the tax, but that wasn't really how many people would have to file and just say that they were exempt. So that's a huge burden of work for CRA. So I'd be interested to hear from CRA, because we also don't know if there's a mechanism to dispute if people think they deserve an exemption, like the one that has a neighbor that's, you know, right next to her that's doesn't have to pay when she does.
Point of order, Madam Chair. We're discussing committee business, and that's usually done in camera. So can we switch to in camera?
I recognize that. By the time we go in camera, we will have, the meeting will be over. There's 5 minutes remaining. If we go in camera, by the time they do all the techie stuff, that's the end of the meeting. We can have this discussion at another time at our beginning of our meeting on Monday. If the members, I have Mr. Sheehan, Mr. Aria, Mr. Carey, and Mr. Cannings that all want to comment on this. And we're in public session, and we should be doing committee business in private session. So I guess I'm gonna go that we go into in camera, because that's how we're supposed to do committee business. So we'll go in camera, but I don't know how much time that's going to take, a couple of minutes. And
we can do this on Monday if you want. We can have this discussion then.
so suggestion is the beginning of Monday's meeting, which is on Softwood Lumber, we'll set aside 10 or 15 minutes for this discussion on Monday morning. Is that all right?
That works, Madam Chair.
Okay, Ms. Gladue, I'm sorry, I cut you off, I think.
It's okay. Motion to adjourn.
Okay.